Late spring rain tapped softly against the windows while the ceiling fan hummed above the bed. The room should have felt peaceful, but the silence between Daniel and Elena had become heavier than words. Daniel sat at the edge of the mattress, scrolling aimlessly through his phone while pretending not to notice the familiar distance between them. Elena lay on her side with her back turned toward him, wrapped tightly in the blanket, as though even sharing the same bed had become a burden. That distance had not appeared overnight. It had grown slowly, quietly, over months of unanswered conversations and cold evenings. Daniel had spent years trying to hold their marriage together. He was always the one reaching out, the one planning little dates, the one asking if they were okay. Every time he tried to reconnect, Elena seemed further away. At first, he blamed stress, her difficult work schedule, the pressure of bills, the exhaustion of adult life. He told himself every marriage went through rough seasons. But eventually, the excuses stopped comforting him. That night, he leaned closer and gently kissed her shoulder. "Elena," he whispered softly. Without turning around, she sighed heavily. "Daniel, not tonight." His chest tightened. He stared at the outline of her figure in the dim light. "It's always not tonight," he said quietly. "Do you even care about us anymore?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then she let out a small laugh. Not a warm laugh. Not the kind shared between two people in love. It was sharp, cold, cruel. "You're always so needy," she muttered. "Honestly, it's exhausting." The word struck harder than shouting ever could. Daniel sat frozen, feeling something inside him crack. He wanted to defend himself, wanted to remind her of everything they had survived together. The years he supported her when she lost jobs. The nights he stayed awake, comforting her during anxiety attacks. The sacrifices he made without ever asking for praise. But instead, he stayed silent, because deep down, he realized something painful. He had spent years begging for love from someone who no longer valued his heart. The next morning, Elena acted as though nothing had happened. She moved around the kitchen, humming softly while making coffee. Sunlight poured through the curtains, as if mocking the heaviness Daniel carried inside him. "Do you want eggs or toast?" she asked casually. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. How could someone wound another person so deeply and then continue their mourning as if nothing mattered? That was the moment something changed inside him. Quietly, permanently. He stopped trying. He did not yell. He did not threaten divorce. He did not start arguments. He simply became tired. Tired of fighting for affection. Tired of proving his worth. Tired of feeling invisible in his own marriage. Over the following weeks, Daniel changed in ways Elena slowly began to notice. He stopped waiting up for her at night. He stopped asking if she wanted to spend time together. Instead, he focused on himself. He returned to the gym. He buried himself in work. He started reading before bed instead of staring at the ceiling wondering what he had done wrong. The desperation disappeared from him little by little. And strangely enough, that unsettled Elena more than his sadness ever had. One evening, she watched him quietly washing dishes after dinner. "You've been really distant lately," she said carefully. Daniel shrugged. "Just tired, I guess." But what he truly meant was far more painful. "I'm tired of loving someone who only notices me when I stop trying." Days turned into weeks, and the silence between them became impossible to ignore. Elena started studying him during dinner, waiting for him to speak first like he always used to. But he never did. The man who once chased her attention was disappearing. And for the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. One Saturday evening, Elena convinced Daniel to attend a birthday gathering for one of her friends. "It'll be good for us," she insisted with a forced smile. Daniel agreed, though he had little interest in going. The restaurant was crowded with laughter, music, and conversations layered over one another. Daniel stayed near the corner of the room, nursing a drink, while Elena mingled effortlessly with her friends. At some point, he overheard her speaking to a woman named Claire. "So," Claire teased, "how are things with Daniel these days?" Elena rolled her eyes dramatically before laughing. "Oh, he used to follow me around constantly," she said. "Now he just mopes around acting hurt all the time." The group chuckled softly. Daniel stood still. Months earlier, hearing something like that would have shattered him. But this time was different. This time he felt clarity. A calm realization settled over him like cold rain. The woman he loved no longer protected his heart when he wasn't around. And maybe she hadn't for a very long time. A few minutes later, Elena approached him with another drink in her hand. "You okay?" she asked. Daniel gently set his glass down. "Ready to go?" he asked calmly. She blinked in surprise. "What? Already?" "The night just started." Daniel looked directly into her eyes. "Maybe for you," he said quietly. "But for me, something ended tonight." Her smile faded. "What does that even mean?" But he didn't answer. For the first time in years, Daniel walked away instead of staying to explain himself. That night, he slept peacefully. No anger, no tears, just silence, and strangely, relief. The next morning, he packed a small bag and drove to his older brother's apartment across town. His phone buzzed constantly. At first, Elena sounded irritated, then confused, then desperate. "Daniel, please answer me. Can we talk? You're seriously leaving over one argument?" But he ignored every message, because after years of not being heard, silence finally became his loudest voice. 3 days later, Daniel returned home to collect more clothes. The house felt different the moment he walked in. Still, heavy. Elena sat curled up on the couch wearing an oversized sweater. Her eyes were swollen and red, as though she had barely slept. For the first time in a long time, she no longer looked angry or distant. She looked afraid. "Daniel," she whispered shakily, "where have you been?" He walked past her quietly toward the bedroom. "Just getting my things." She quickly stood and followed him. "You're not really leaving, are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I know I said terrible things, but I didn't mean them." Daniel slowly turned toward her. The pain in his eyes made her fall silent. "No," he said softly. "You meant every word." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "You made me feel unwanted," he continued. "You made me feel weak for needing love from my own wife. And the worst part is after hearing those things over and over, I started believing them." Elena covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I was frustrated," she cried. "I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." Daniel looked away for a moment, struggling to steady his breathing. "I spent years trying to save us," he said quietly. "But somewhere along the way, I lost myself trying to keep your love." The room fell silent except for Elena's quiet sobbing. For the first time, she truly saw the damage her words had caused, not just to their marriage, but to the man standing in front of her. And Daniel realized something heartbreaking in that moment. Sometimes people only recognize the value of love after they've pushed it too far away to reach again. Daniel took a slow breath and looked down at the floor for a moment before speaking again. "This was never about one argument," he said quietly. "It wasn't about one bad night or one cruel comment." Elena stood frozen in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "It was every single night I reached for you and felt rejected," he continued. "Every moment I tried to hold our marriage together while you treated my love like it was something embarrassing. You made me feel like caring too much was weakness." His voice remained calm, but the pain underneath, it was impossible to hide. "I gave you my loyalty, my patience, my heart, and somewhere along the way, you started treating those things like they meant nothing." Elena shook her head quickly. "No, Daniel, please, that's not true." "But it is," he replied softly. "You laughed about me with your friends. You made jokes about the man who spent years trying to love you the best way he knew how." She covered her face with both hands, crying harder now. "I didn't realize how cruel I'd become," she whispered. Daniel looked at her with tired eyes. "That's the problem, Elena. You stopped noticing my pain because you got used to it." The silence that followed felt unbearable. The old clock in the hallway ticked loudly while the evening light faded through the curtains. Their home suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a place filled with memories instead of warmth. Elena slowly stepped toward him and reached for his arm. But Daniel stepped back. The movement broke something inside her. Her lips trembled as she stared at him in disbelief. "I never thought you'd actually leave," she whispered weakly. Daniel gave a sad smile, the kind that comes from finally accepting a painful truth. "Neither did I. For years," He had believed love meant enduring anything. He thought staying loyal through pain proved strength. But now he understood something he wished he had learned much earlier. Love was never supposed to make someone feel worthless. That evening, Daniel walked out of the house, carrying only a small bag and the exhaustion of years spent feeling emotionally alone. Elena didn't stop him. She stood in the doorway, crying silently, while he drove away into the darkening night. But after he left, the silence inside the house became unbearable. The empty side of the bed, the untouched coffee mug he always used, the absence of his quiet presence moving through the kitchen every morning. For the first time, Elena understood what loneliness truly felt like, and guilt followed closely behind it. A week later, the messages started coming. At first they were short. "Please talk to me. I can't sleep. I miss you." Then they became longer, more emotional, more honest. "I keep replaying everything I said to you. I hate myself for making you feel unloved. You were always there for me, even when I didn't deserve it." Daniel read some of the messages late at night, while sitting alone on his brother's balcony. The city lights flickered in the distance while cool wind brushed against his face. Part of him still loved her. That was the hardest part. Love does not disappear overnight just because someone breaks your heart. Sometimes it stays far longer than it should. But Daniel had changed during those weeks apart. He started waking up early every morning to run through the quiet streets before sunrise. He reconnected with old friends he had slowly drifted away from during his marriage. He laughed again. Not forced laughter meant to hide sadness, but genuine moments of peace he thought he had lost forever. Little by little, he began rebuilding himself. Not for revenge, not to prove anything to Elena, but because he finally understood his own worth. Months passed. The heaviness inside him slowly faded. One cold evening, while sitting alone in his apartment after work, his phone lit up with another message from Elena. He stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. "You were right," the message read. "I treated your love carelessly because I assumed you would never stop giving it to me. I see now how deeply I hurt you. Losing you made me realize too late that you were the best thing in my life." Daniel leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. For a moment, memories flooded his mind. The early years of their marriage. Road trips with loud music and laughter. Late-night conversations about dreams and future plans. The way she once looked at him before distance replaced affection. He remembered all of it, and somehow, that made letting go even more painful. A single tear rolled down his cheek before he quietly deleted the message. Not out of anger, not out of cruelty, but because his heart finally understood something his mind had been trying to accept for a long time. Some apologies arrive after the damage has already changed everything. Daniel walked to the window and stared out into the peaceful night. For the first time in years, his life no longer felt controlled by rejection, confusion, or emotional exhaustion. The loneliness he once feared had transformed into peace, and peace felt better than constantly begging to be loved. He finally realized that self-respect begins the moment a person stops chasing affection from someone unwilling to value it. Elena once mocked him for wanting closeness, for wanting connection, for wanting to feel loved by his own wife. But now, she was the one reaching into silence, searching for a version of him that no longer existed. And the hardest lesson of all was this. Sometimes the people who break your heart do not understand your value until your absence teaches it to them. But by then, it may already be too late. And so, Daniel finally chose himself. Not because he stopped loving Elena, but because he realized love should never require someone to lose their dignity just to keep a relationship alive. Some wounds are caused by betrayal. Others are caused by silence, rejection, and years of feeling unseen by the person who promised to stand beside you forever. Daniel learned that the hardest goodbye is not walking away from someone you hate. It's walking away from someone you still love, simply because staying is destroying you. In the end, Elena lost the one person who would have done anything for her, and Daniel discovered something far more valuable than revenge. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop begging for love and start believing you deserve it freely. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone, or taught you something about self-worth and relationships, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more emotional and powerful stories that stay with you long after they end. And remember, never beg to be valued by someone who only notices your worth after you're gone.